Your neighbor waves at you every morning. He shovels up the driveways when it snows. He smiles to your kids. He shows up to the neighborhood barbecues, bringing something homemade, asking how your parents are doing. He is by every measure the perfectly nice neighbor. Three of the men I'm about to tell you were described in exactly those words by their neighbors who lived next to them for years, in some cases even decades. And the one thing they had in common, no one of these neighbors had any idea. Hi, welcome to the channel, and today I'm going to tell you about three notorious cases in the American history and the one thing they had in common that nobody saw it coming. So let's get into it. Dennis Rader lived in Wichita, Kansas. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a house on a quiet street that looked like every other house on the block. He worked for the city, specifically as a compliance officer. His job was to inspect properties, issue citations, and to make sure everyone was following the local ordinances. Too many weeds in your backyard, Dennis Rader will knock on your door. He was also for many years the president of the council in his local church. They trusted him, they elected him, and they were following him. Between 1974 and 1991, Dennis Rader took the lives of 10 people in Wichita area. He sends letters to newspapers, to the police, describing all his crimes. He even named himself BTS, which stood for the methods he used. Then, in 1999, he stopped completely. Investigators had his DNA, but no match. The case went cold. Rader continued going to church, he continued issuing citations, and he continued waving to his neighbors. Later, in 2004, he started sending letters and packages again. He wanted attention. He wanted to be remembered. Investigators later described his behavior as classic narcissistic behavior, and his need for recognition became stronger than the need of self-preservation. In 2004, he sent investigators a floppy disk, an actual floppy disk. And before, he reached to them repeatedly, asking whether it could be traced. They told him that not. It took them only 5 minutes to trace it back to his church computer. He was arrested in 2005 on an ordinary neighborhood in his ordinary home. His wife, of 34 years old, said she had no idea. His adult kids said the same. The church council held an emergency meeting to process all what happened. His neighbors told he was completely normal, that he was just fine. One described him as, quote, a little strict, but normal. If Dennis Rader blended in by being unremarkable, Wayne Gacy blended in by being the opposite. Gacy was the kind of neighbor everyone liked. He threw up parties, big parties, with food and music and open door policy. Everyone liked him. He was also involved in local Democratic parties in Chicago. He ran a successful construction business, he employed dozens of people, and also he took part in charity. And as a part of his charity, he was using to dress up as a clown to attend children's hospital and community events. He was photographed at a function with Rosalynn Carter, the former First Lady of the United States, in 1978. He received a signed photo and he framed it. Between 1972 and 1978, he was responsible for the deaths of 33 young men and boys in Chicago area. The victims were concealed beneath his own house. Neighbors occasionally noticed an unpleasant smell coming from his property. He explained that it was a plumbing issue, something wrong with the drainage. And you know what? They believed him. One neighbor later recalled helping Gacy on multiple occasions in his garden being completely unaware what was happening beneath the ground. He was arrested in 1978 after investigators linked him to the disappearance of a 15-year-old boy. And the search of property gave them the full extent of what has been happening. At the trial, the Gacy's defense tried to tell that he was mentally ill. The court disputed for a couple of hours before giving him a verdict. He was sentenced to death and was executed in 1994. And neighbors who attended his parties, eaten his food, laughed at his jokes, gave interview after interview, telling that they had no idea. You may happen to hear about Joseph DeAngelo, and me myself is planning to make a bigger video because this case, it needs its own deep down. But today I want to focus on one specific moment. What neighbors saw. DeAngelo lived in the suburb of Sacramento, California. He lived in the same house for decades. He was in his 70s. He was retired. So he lived his completely normal retired life. Neighbors described him as quiet, a little grumpy. He used to shout at some people if they were trespassing his lawn. One of the neighbors mentioned that he used to stand up at his driveway and mutter to himself. Mostly though, they described him as boring, unremarkable, something you forget that exists after a couple of years. Between 1974 and 1886, he was responsible for at least 13 homicides and more than 50 assaults in California area. He was a former police officer. He knew how the investigations were conducted, and he used this knowledge systematically. At 1986, he stopped. He settled down in his house to live his normal life, to garden, to go to hardware stores, to wave or sometimes not wave to his neighbors. When the investigators arrested him in 2018, using the forensic genealogy, they did it outside of his house on a quiet afternoon. His neighbors came out to watch. Some of them told that they were completely stunned. One said, "He was just so boring." Others said, "I lived next to him for more than 15 years, and I don't even know his last name." 3 different men, 3 different decades, 3 different personalities. One was invisible, other magnetic, one simply forgettable. But they had something in common that researchers studied extensively. In 1941, the psychiatrist Harvey Cleckley published a book which called The Mask of Sanity. His central observation was that certain individuals with serious behavioral issues showed completely normal and social exterior. They don't seem dangerous, they seem just fine. Sometimes they seem more than fine, charming, helpful, well-liked. The mask, Cleckley argued, was not accidental. It was functional. It provides access, trust. There is also well-documented cognitive bias called the familiarity effect. The more we see someone, the more our brain categorizes them as safe, as known, regardless of what we actually know about these people. Neighbors, co-workers, regulars at coffee shop, our brain marks them as something known, as something safe. And familiarity reads as safety, even when sometimes it should not. The 3 of these men understood this, consciously or not. They stayed visible, they stayed familiar, and for a long time this familiarity was the best protection they ever had. A city compliance officer, a man who dressed up as a clown for sick children, a retiree who used to yell around about his yard. I'm not telling you to be suspicious about your neighbors. Most people are exactly what they appear to be. But I do think it's something worth sitting with here. The idea that our instinct to trust the familiar faces can sometimes play with us the bad joke, and that the people who understands this instinct well are sometimes the people we least expect. So, do you actually know your neighbors? Like, actually know them? Let me know in the comment section. And if it was your kind of the video, subscribe. I have a lot more coming.